Have you ever, spent ages tweaking your privacy settings, making sure your social media is locked down tight, maybe even deleting an old account you barely remembered? You hit save, breathe out, and get that nice, secure feeling like, okay, digital door's locked. But what if that feeling, that sense of control, is actually, well, kind of a digital mirage? What if there's this whole other world of your personal info out there, totally public, but just sort of hidden from your view, waiting for someone to connect the dots into a, frankly, surprisingly detailed picture of your life? Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really plunging in deep, tackling a topic that, let's be honest, affects every single one of us in this digital age: the invisible web, where your data is public. We're aiming to pull back the curtain on this massive, often unseen landscape of your personal information that's just openly accessible. And we'll explore what that actually means for your privacy, yeah, but also your security, maybe even your sense of who you are online.
Yeah, and our mission today is exactly that, to shine a light into those shadows. We're going to take those bits and pieces of your digital life that seem totally disconnected. Old social media posts, forgotten counts you made years ago, public records, even like obscure news mentions. And we'll show you how these fragments, they don't just float around in isolation. Using specific methods, they actually come together, they coalesce into this incredibly detailed and often, honestly, startlingly accurate personal profile. We want to go beyond just what data is out there. We need to understand the why. Why is it accessible? And the how is it collected? And maybe most importantly, what are the real-world impacts? The goal here is empowerment. We want to give you genuine awareness and, crucially, practical, actionable insights so you can navigate this invisible web with a bit more confidence.
Okay, and to help us navigate this complex territory, we've dug into some really insightful analyses and research. We're drawing from sources like The Invisible Web, Personal Data's Vast Reach, another piece called The Invisible Web, Your Public Data Footprint, and also The Unseen Public, Digital Footprints and OSINT. So we've got a solid base here. So by the end of this deep dive, expect a few aha moments. You're going to get a much clearer picture of just how extensive your online footprint really is. We'll even walk you through a pretty eye-opening ethical demonstration of how this scattered data is actually found and pieced together. It's fascinating stuff. And then, the key part. We'll arm you with practical steps you can take right now to better protect yourself in this world where everything feels like it's always online. So, yeah, prepare to be fascinated, maybe a little surprised, perhaps even a bit concerned by just how much of your life is quietly out there.
Right, so first things first. Let's clear up a term that often causes a bit of confusion. When we talk about the invisible web, where your data is public, it's really important to grasp that we are not talking about the deep web, at least not in the way it's usually, sometimes mistakenly, understood. That distinction is key, especially for our listeners who are already pretty informed on this stuff. Now, you probably know the internet has layers, right? So very briefly, you've got the surface web. That's everything your standard search engine like Google or Bing can find and index. It's where most of us spend our time: news sites, social media, shopping online, that sort of thing. Then there's the deep web. This is content that search engines don't index. It's perfectly legitimate stuff, usually behind a password or inside a database for privacy or security. Think about your online bank account, your email inbox, those academic databases like JSTOR, or maybe your company's internal network. You need the right URL and usually a login, but your normal browser works just fine. And finally, way down, there's the dark web. It's a tiny hidden part of the deep web. You need special software like the Tor browser to get there, because it's all about anonymity. It definitely has a reputation for, well, illicit activities, but it's also used for secure communication by journalists or activists in certain situations. Okay, but here's the really critical point for our discussion today: the invisibility of your public data. The stuff we're focusing on isn't invisible because it's technically hidden away in the deep web. No, this data is actually publicly available. It's sitting right there on the surface web. Its invisibility comes from the fact that it's incredibly fragmented and disaggregated. It's scattered across so many different places, different platforms, government databases, online archives, you name it. It's in such tiny, seemingly unimportant pieces that the average person just doesn't have the tools or the time or, frankly, the methods to pull it all together, to centralize it and connect all those dots. So even though it's technically public, it's effectively hidden from you. That's why throughout this deep dive, we'll be focusing on what we're calling the disaggregated public web. It's visible if you have the right tools and know-how, but functionally invisible to the everyday user.
Okay, so I think I'm getting this. It's not that the internet itself is hiding the data. It's more that we just don't see the whole picture because it's in so many pieces. Like imagine having 1,000 jigsaw puzzle pieces scattered across, I don't know, 10 different rooms. Each piece is right there visible, but you can't see the final picture until someone gathers them all up and puts them together.
Exactly. That's a great analogy. It's
Yeah.
the aggregation, the connecting of those pieces that makes it visible and powerful.
That really reframes what invisible means here. It's not hidden from the web, it's hidden from us in plain sight. All right, so building on that idea of scattered pieces, let's really dig into this concept of your digital footprint. It's not like one single story, right? It's more like this constantly growing trail of digital breadcrumbs you leave behind everywhere online. You've got your active digital footprint. This is the stuff you knowingly put out there, the data you intentionally create and share. This is what most people think of first your social media posts, right? Comments you leave, photos you upload, forms you fill out online. It's the part you consciously shape, the online persona you try to control. When you log in and post something, your name, or at least your username, is usually attached, creating this clear record that you start.
Hmm. And then there's the flip side, the passive digital footprint. This is the trail you leave without really meaning to, or maybe even without knowing it. It's the data collected about you quietly in the background. Think about your browsing history. Every site you visit adds to it. Or the location data your phone apps collect, sometimes even when you're not actively using them. Or think about cookies, storing info about your browsing habits across different websites. Just visiting a web page often logs your IP address, maybe your rough location, the time you visited. These are like little digital echoes you create just by existing online, and they add up significantly. And here's where the real vulnerability lies, and it's a core point for us today. It's how these seemingly separate pieces, maybe your professional LinkedIn profile over here, your casual Instagram post over there, maybe a public property record somewhere else, they look isolated. Individually, yeah, maybe these seem harmless. But when someone starts connecting them, using these OSINT techniques we mentioned, with these fragments don't just form a picture. They create this incredibly detailed, comprehensive, and often really revealing profile of who you are, what you do, where you go, your habits, your interests. It's the aggregation that turns the seemingly invisible into something alarmingly visible.
And that aggregation, that connection of dots, leads us straight into something researchers often call the privacy paradox. It's this really interesting psychological quirk, right? Where many of us genuinely say we care about online privacy, we adjust settings, we try to be careful, but then we often act in ways that contradict that, willingly sharing tons of personal info. For our listeners, the paradox isn't just that it exists, but maybe why we cling to these comforting illusions of control.
That's exactly it. The psychology behind it is fascinating. People who are really meticulous about their online privacy, carefully curating their posts, they're often driven by this deep need for personal control, for genuine connection within a safe space. They see their private digital worlds as extensions of themselves, and they manage access carefully to build trust. It's a very conscious effort to carve out a safe zone. But, and this is the crux, this psychological drive often bumps right up against the technical realities and, frankly, the legal loopholes. And that's where the paradox really bites. Our stated desire for privacy gets undermined because we often lack awareness of how data is really collected, analyzed, and shared, often completely bypassing our individual settings. And let's be honest, the immediate reward of sharing a photo or getting a personalized recommendation often feels more real, more tangible than the abstract, maybe distant risk of data exposure down the line. It's that classic cognitive bias. Immediate gratification wins out over future potential harm.
Which brings us neatly to some common misconceptions. And for our audience, it's less about listing the myths and more about why they persist and what sophisticated mechanisms actually bypass our efforts. Like, take the privacy policy fallacy. People see privacy policy and think, okay, my data's safe, it won't be shared.
Right. And the important question isn't just what these policies say, but why they're written the way they are. In reality, these are usually incredibly long, dense legal documents, their main job. Often it's not consumer protection. It's providing legal cover for the company, covering their practices for collecting, processing, and, yeah, often selling your data. They detail the company's rights, not necessarily your protections. You could argue a more honest title might be how we use and make money from your data. The economic drive to collect data is huge, so these policies are often designed to grant broad permissions, not restrict usage.
And related to that, the legal misconception, the feeling that if something feels wrong, intrusive, unfair, it must be illegal.
Yeah, that's a big disconnect. Unfortunately, especially in the U.S., we don't have one big overarching federal privacy law like the EU's GDPR. So we have this patchwork. This means in many cases, companies are actually operating completely within the law when they collect, analyze, even sell your personal info as long as they don't outright lie about it in their policy. There's often this frustrating gap between what feels ethically right to us and what the law actually allows.
Okay, and one more that still trips people up.
Uh,
The incognito mode myth. You use it, you feel like you vanish. But we know, especially for our listeners, that's not the whole story. So what is still visible even when you're incognito?
Well, incognito or private browsing modes, they are good at stopping your browser from saving your history, cookies, and site data locally on that specific device. That's useful, but it's not an invisibility cloak online. Your internet service provider, your ISP, can still see what sites you're visiting, the websites themselves. They can still track you using techniques like device fingerprinting, looking at your unique browser setup. If you log into Google or Facebook while in incognito, guess what? They can still connect your activity to your account, and definitely if you're on a work or school network, they can monitor you. So it provides local privacy on that device, but it's far from anonymous out on the wider web. So if we pull all this together, the real issue, the sort of core friction here, isn't just about us trying to satisfy a psychological need for control with settings. It's much bigger. It's about these systemic issues, the data economy, the often outdated laws, the pervasive technical threats that just bypass our individual efforts entirely. You can lock down your Facebook profile perfectly, but a data broker legally pulling your public property records and voter registration can still build a pretty detailed picture of you, completely regardless of your Facebook settings. That's the disconnect.
Okay, that really lays the groundwork for understanding how we perceive our data or maybe misperceive it. Now, let's try to wrap our heads around the sheer, almost unbelievable scale of this publicly accessible information. We're not talking small amounts here. It's like a digital tsunami. Just think about this. Globally, there are now over 5 billion social media users. 5 billion. And Meta's platforms alone, that's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, they have something like 3.2 billion monthly active users. And get this, YouTube users upload 500 hours of video content every single minute. It's just this constant, massive flood of self-generated, often public data pouring onto the web.
And it's not just the volume, it's the retention. These platforms often have aggressive data retention policies and, let's be frank, invasive tracking. Facebook, for instance, is known to keep user data for months, potentially years, even after you try to delete it. Standard is often 90 days or more. Incogni's 2025 ranking, which basically scores how invasive companies are with data, gave Facebook a score of nearly 19 out of 20. That's huge. Instagram and TikTok. They track over 20 different data points per user, things like your precise location, your contacts list, even if your account is set to private. They often get this through metadata hidden in your posts or app permissions you granted, maybe without fully realizing it. And something people often forget about, those old forgotten profiles. Studies suggest maybe up to 30% of users have dormant accounts just sitting out there on old platforms. Think MySpace, early Twitter accounts, random forums you joined once. These are like digital ghosts holding on to old posts, photos, personal details you've long forgotten. But they're often still indexed, still accessible, ready to pop up and offer clues about your past. They just linger indefinitely.
Right, and it's not just the words you type. Photos themselves can accidentally give away so much, can't they? How does that work?
Oh, absolutely. Photos are gold mines for OSINT. Even pictures you think are totally private or shared only with friends can leak incredible amounts of detail just from the background. We're talking reflections in windows, showing street signs, license plates visible on cars parked nearby, maybe a distinctive house number, local landmarks, even things like your kids' school uniforms. And then there's the hidden data, the EXIF data embedded in the image file itself. This can include the exact GPS coordinates where the photo was taken, the model of the phone or camera used, the precise date and time. You post a picture of your breakfast. If that metadata isn't stripped, it could literally pinpoint your home address. Plus, the platforms themselves aren't fortresses. LinkedIn, for example, had like 10 major data breaches by 2025, exposing data from 700 million records. So even your carefully crafted professional persona isn't immune.
Wow. So it really hammers home that even if you feel like you're totally in control of your social media, that feeling might just be an illusion. You see stats like 81% of users feeling they have little control over their data on these platforms. And here's another kicker. 82% of iOS apps apparently track users anyway, regardless of the privacy settings chosen. So your private post, it could still leak out if a friend shares it or someone takes a screenshot or it gets scraped by an archiving site operating outside the platform's control. It feels like a constant uphill battle.
Which brings us to a really key player in all this. The data brokers. These companies are kind of the silent architects building this invisible web we're talking about. Their entire business is collecting, analyzing, and then selling or licensing your personal data. They are essentially running automated, large-scale OSINT operations, constantly hoovering up information, often completely behind the scenes.
And the scale they operate on is just mind-blowing. Get this. Big data brokers, like Oracle Data Cloud, reportedly hold files on something like 95% of adults in the US. That translates to maybe 2.5 trillion individual data points. They build profiles on maybe 500 million consumers globally, and then they sell these incredibly detailed dossiers packed with personal info, sometimes for as little as a penny, maybe up to $1 each. It's this huge hidden marketplace trading in your identity.
So the obvious question is, where do they get all this data? It's not just one source, it's a mix. First, yeah, they scrape information from social media. Using bots or maybe official APIs, they pull public details from profiles, yours, maybe even your friends, if their settings are loose. Second, and this is crucial, they legally buy massive amounts of public records from government agencies. Voter lists, property deeds, court records, professional licenses, all perfectly legal to acquire. Third, they use sophisticated algorithms to infer sensitive details about you. Based on what you like, what you browse, what you search for, they can make pretty accurate guesses about your political views, potential health conditions, your income level, things you never explicitly stated online. And finally, they get commercial data. Your shopping history, warranty cards you filled out, loyalty program data, info from subscriptions, often gathered through clauses buried deep in the fine print of those terms and conditions we all tend to click agree on without reading. And the dossiers they build, they're incredibly rich. They can include detailed demographics, your marital status, number of kids, education level, financial info like estimated income, maybe even credit score ranges, your online activity, browsing, searches, your lifestyle, interest, hobbies, political leanings, causes you support. It's not just surface stuff. It's a deep map of your life as a consumer and a person.
And these profiles, often built without you even knowing, are then sold off to all sorts of clients. Advertisers, obviously, wanting to target you precisely. Political campaigns looking to sway specific voters, financial institutions assessing loan risks, even landlords screening tenants or employers doing background checks. Basically, anyone wanting deep insights into individuals can potentially buy this data.
Yeah, and just to underscore this, a 2025 User-Centrics report found that 70% of companies actually increased their data collection recently, and 80% of apps are using your data for commercial purposes. Your email address, which is often the key identifier linking your different online activities, turns up as something like 52% of all data breaches. This makes it super easy for brokers or attackers to connect those scattered pieces back to you.
Okay, so beyond social media and data brokers, there's the whole world of public records, official government databases. In the US alone, we're talking over 3 billion entries. And these aren't hidden, they are legally, openly available to anyone who knows how to look. They form this permanent, official story of your life.
Right, and what's really powerful about public records is their breadth, and crucially, their permanence. Think about voter rolls. Across the U.S., that's maybe 200 million entries, often with your full name, home address, sometimes even your birth date. Property deeds, you can often find these easily on county websites or real estate sites. They reveal home values, ownership history, names of co-owners, precise addresses for millions of Americans. You might find court filings online depending on the place, showing things like divorces, lawsuits, maybe minor offenses. Corporate filings for LLCs reveal directors, shareholders, addresses. Professional licenses, doctors, lawyers, teachers, their rosters are often public. Plus, countless government registers, FOIA archives, lobbying lists. It's vast. And the permanence thing is huge. Once data hits the public record, it generally stays there forever. That divorce filing from 20 years ago, still online. These aren't fleeting digital footprints. They're etched in stone, digitally speaking. And talking about permanence and risk, remember that National Public Data Incident in 2025 leaked 2.7 billion records, including social security numbers for 272 million people. Separately, healthcare data breaches involving super-sensitive protected health information, PHI, affected 276 million individuals just in 2024. The scale of exposure from these official sources is immense.
And it's not only the official stuff. Our lives get documented in news articles, maybe profiles we totally forgot we even made. Google News alone archives billions of articles. A local newspaper piece from years back could mention your job then, an event you attended, maybe your kid's school award, wedding announcements, obituaries, often with full names and ages, creating this public narrative you never really consented to in that form. Even signing an online petition or donating to a cause. Sometimes those platforms expose names and affiliations, especially if their privacy settings aren't great. Little actions add up to your public profile.
Exactly. And then there are those forgotten profiles we mentioned. Old forum accounts for a hobby you dropped years ago, gaming profiles on Steam or Xbox, old accounts on hobbyist sites, even product reviews you left on Amazon under your real name. They just hang around online, like digital ghosts. Plus, you have directory sites like 192.com in the UK or 411.com in the US. They hold hundreds of millions of entries scraped from old phone books and directories. It's a huge repository of historical personal data people assume vanished. And here's a fascinating bit. Archival persistence. Even if you are super diligent and delete an old account, archiving services like the Internet Archive and Wayback Machine take snapshots of websites all the time, and they keep them, sometimes for decades. So what you thought was gone might just be preserved in an archive, accessible to anyone. It creates this permanent, searchable history of the public web, including your past presence.
That permanence is, yeah, unsettling. And here's a key thing for listeners. Specialized tools like cluster maps are designed to connect these dots. They can map these fragmented records, apparently uncovering about 40% more data than just doing a basic Google search. It's not just finding pieces, it's seeing the network between them. It really is this vast treasure trove, trillions of data points estimated by 2025. Makes you wonder what picture's out there about you.
And it's vital to remember, beyond the stuff you post, there's all this indirect data revealing surprising things, like credential leaks. Your emails, passwords, phone numbers, they're constantly being bought and sold online because of endless data breaches. Billions of records exposed over the years. It's a massive ongoing risk for nearly everyone.
Which is exactly why reusing passwords is just so incredibly risky, right? That one old password from a breach back in, say, 2013, if you used it on a newer, more important account today, bam, you could be compromised. Sites like Have I Been Prone really show the scale of this. You put in your email and it tells you how many known breaches it was found in. It's a real wake-up call.
Then you've got metadata, data about your data. It tells hidden stories. EXIF, data in photos. We mentioned GPS, but also device model, timestamp. Domain WHOIS records the registration info for websites, can expose personal details of the owner unless they pay for privacy protection. And think about all the permissions you grant apps, location check-ins, fitness trackers, logging your runs, ride-sharing histories. They create this incredibly detailed, often real-time, log of your movements and routines.
And lastly, something surprisingly common. Public cloud documents. How many times have we heard about misconfigured Google Docs or Trello boards or Amazon S3 buckets accidentally exposing sensitive stuff? Resumes, contact lists, even medical records. Just one wrong setting on a shared folder can make private info public. I remember reading about a fictional case, a startup accidentally leaking its entire payroll database for months from a misconfigured S3 bucket. Simple mistake, huge consequences.
Exactly. So if we tie all this together, you can see the intense interconnectedness, that casual social post about a local festival. It might link to a public record showing you own property nearby, which connects to a news article mentioning your volunteer work there. Each piece adds to the puzzle. IBM's 2025 report estimated the average cost of a data breach hit $4.88 million. And personally identifiable information, PII, that's the data that can identify you, was compromised in 52% of those breaches. PII is the goal for attackers. It's not just what you share, it's what can be connected about you, and the huge cost, financial and personal, when that connection is breached. Okay, so we've painted this picture of the invisible web, the sheer amount of data out there. Now let's make it more concrete. How do people actually connect these scattered pieces? This is where open source intelligence, or OSINT, comes in as the core methodology. OSINT basically is the systematic process. It's about collecting, analyzing, and interpreting information that's publicly accessible to support some kind of investigation. It turns raw data into something actionable. And its purpose, well, it varies widely. Law enforcement uses it to solve crimes. Corporations use it for risk assessment, maybe checking out a potential partner or employee. And unfortunately, yes, malicious actors use it too. But fundamentally, OSINT is about making that disaggregated, scattered data visible and useful. It weaves those fragments into a coherent story.
Right, so it's not just random Googling, it's structured. What are the typical steps involved in this OSINT lifecycle? I think it's usually like a 5-step process.
That's right. It's quite methodical. Step 1 is 1, planning and objective setting. Before you do anything, you define a clear goal. What are you trying to find out and why? Is it assessing a company's security by looking at their public infrastructure? Or maybe trying to find public info on a missing person for a humanitarian group like Trace Labs?
You need a specific target and reason. Without that, you're just lost in the data.
Okay, plan in place. Then step 2 is 2, data collection. This is where you actually start gathering that raw public data. Exactly. And here we often talk about 2 main approaches. Passive OSINT is collecting info without directly interacting with the target. You leave no trace. Think searching public breach databases for an email. You're just observing from afar. Active OSINT, on the other hand, involves some interaction that might leave a footprint, like Maybe sending a connection request on LinkedIn to view a private profile. Though ethical considerations around consent become really important here, and for today, we're mostly focused on the purely passive public side.
Got it. So after you've gathered all this raw data, you move to 3, data processing and organization. I bet this is crucial, given how messy the data probably is.
Oh, absolutely essential. Raw data is often unstructured, it's noisy, there's tons of irrelevant stuff. So this step is all about filtering it, organizing it, maybe putting it into a structured format, and critically trying to verify its authenticity. You're cleaning it up, making it usable for analysis. You have to ask, is this info reliable? Is it current? Does it actually relate to my target?
And then comes the really interesting part, 4, data analysis and correlation. This is the connecting the dots phase you keep mentioning. What does that actually involve?
This is really the core of OSINT work. You start identifying relationships between different pieces of data you've collected. You look for patterns, anomalies, things that seem connected. You assess the relevance of each piece to your objective. And accuracy is everything here. You have to rigorously cross-verify findings using multiple independent sources. You can't build intelligence on shaky foundations. This is where raw information gets synthesized into actual intelligence, into insights. You're not just seeing the pieces anymore. You're actively assembling the puzzle.
Makes sense. And the final step is 5, reporting and dissemination.
Right. Once the analysis is done, you compile everything into a structured report. You highlight the key findings, draw conclusions based on the evidence, and maybe recommend actions based on the intelligence gathered. This report is tailored specifically to the needs of whoever requested the investigation, based on the objectives set back in step 1.
Okay, that structured process really drives home that OSINT isn't just casual snooping. It's a deliberate, methodical, almost analytical approach to building a comprehensive picture from public fragments. Way more strategic than maybe people assume.
Now, to really show how this works in practice and critically, to do it ethically without exposing anyone's real data, we often use self-audits or case studies from ethical OSINT communities. Trace Labs, for instance, runs events where volunteers consent to having their public data searched to help find missing persons. For today, though, we'll use a purely fictional persona, let's call her Samantha Lee, to walk through a realistic simulation. This will show you what kind of information is typically exposed and how quickly these connections can actually be made.
All right, sounds good. I'm curious to see this in action. Let's say you start with just one tiny piece of information, a username, SamLee92. Where do you go from there? What's the first move?
Okay, first move. Step 1. Username correlation. I'd probably use a tool like Magrit, which scans hundreds or thousands of websites for that specific username, or even just start with broad Google searches like SamLee92 in quotes, maybe combined with common site names like SamLee92 Instagram or Reddit. So I run the search. Almost instantly, results pop up. We find the same username, SamLee92, on Instagram, on Reddit, and a comment on a cooking blog, and even on a GitHub account. Now, the inferences start immediately. 92 often suggests a birth year, so maybe born 1992. The cooking blog points to an interest. GitHub suggests maybe a tech background or hobby. We've got threads to pull.
Okay, so just from the username, you've already got potential platforms and some basic interests. What's step 2? Social media footprint, digging into those profiles.
Exactly. I check out that Instagram profile first. Even if it's private, often the profile picture itself is public. In our fictional case, let's say Samantha's profile pic has this really distinctive, colorful mural in the background. Then I'd look at the Reddit activity linked to SamLee92. We see posts in the subreddit called Our Personal Finance AU. The AU is a clue. And in one comment, she casually mentions, my commute from Footscray. Now, the inferences get much sharper. I take an image of that mural from Instagram and run a reverse image search using Google Images or TinyEye. Bingo. The search identifies it as well-known street art in Melbourne, Australia. Location narrowed down significantly. The Reddit posts confirm Australia from the AU subreddit and specifically mention Footscray, which is a known suburb of Melbourne. We've gone from just a username to a specific city and suburb.
Wow, okay. That's fast. You got a potential location. What about step 3, public records? How do you leverage Footscray?
With a common surname like Lee and a specific suburb, Footscray, I'd now pivot to searching Australian public records databases, things like electoral rolls or property sales data specific to that area. A search for Lee Footscray might bring up property transfer records or voter registration details. While finding a Samantha Lee isn't definitive proof on its own, Lee is common. If we find a record showing a Samantha Lee bought property in Footscray around, say, 2014, well, that lines up nicely with our inferred 1992 birth year and someone likely buying a place after university. It's another piece to cross-reference.
This is really starting to build a detailed picture. Now, step 4, LinkedIn. That seems like a logical next step, especially with the GitHub hint.
Absolutely. Given the potential Melbourne location and tech hint, searching Samantha Lee Melbourne on LinkedIn is a high probability move. And boom, there she is. A profile for Samantha Lee, listed as a data analyst, currently working at a big energy company, started in 2020. Her profile also lists a bachelor's degree from Monash University, which is in Melbourne, graduated 2014. This is OSINT Gold. Suddenly, we have her current job, past job history potentially, her specific skills, her education timeline, maybe even names of colleagues she's connected to. Think about the risk here. This info is perfect ammunition for a highly targeted spear phishing attack. An attacker could craft an email pretending to be her boss, mentioning a specific project listed on her LinkedIn. Makes the scam incredibly believable. Or someone could try to impersonate her professionally.
Yeah, that's chilling. And then we get to the stuff people really worry about. Step 5, old footprints. The digital skeletons, right?
Exactly. This is often where surprising, sometimes embarrassing stuff surfaces. I'd use tools that search archived web pages like the Wayback Machine and old news databases, searching for Sam Lee 92 or Samantha Lee Melbourne again. Maybe we find a cached version of that cooking blog post from 2010, still using Sam Lee 92, and she signed off as Sam Lee, year 12 at Maribyrnong College. Then maybe a search in local Melbourne news archives for Maribyrnong College Science Fair turns up a small article from 2011. Samantha Lee wins science fair. Suddenly we've confirmed her old high school, reinforced her approximate age, and even found past achievements. Things she probably assumed were long gone or totally private. It fills in the backstory.
And the critical security check. Step 6, data breach exposure. Using something like, have I been pwned with that likely email, samlee92@gmail.com, what might turn up?
This is a standard check. I plug samlee92@gmail.com into have I been pwned. And in our fictional scenario, let's say it comes back positive. Found in 15 known data breaches, including that big LinkedIn breach from 2012 and maybe one of those massive collection lists of compiled credentials.
And the danger there is huge, right? That password from 2012, if she reused it anywhere else, especially on important accounts like banking or her main email, attackers could use credential stuffing bots to try that old password everywhere.
Precisely. It's a massive vulnerability. And one last check, step 7, photo metadata. Remember that Instagram photo with the mural? What if, just maybe, one of her other public photos wasn't properly stripped of its EXIF data? We'd download a few public photos and run them through an EXIF viewer tool. And imagine, one of them, maybe a picture of a train platform, contains embedded GPS coordinates. We plot those coordinates on a map. And they pinpoint a location right near Footscray train station, the suburb she mentioned on Reddit. This isn't just confirming the suburb, it's potentially revealing a part of her daily commute, a specific location she frequents. It moves from general location to a potential stalking vector. Incredibly invasive, hidden in plain sight in the photo's data.
Okay, let me just recap. In, maybe 30 minutes. Starting with just a username, samlee92, an OSINT practitioner, has built this incredibly detailed profile. Full name, likely age, around 33 now, education history, current job, past job maybe, specific suburb, old high school, breached email and potential password exposure, personal interests like cooking and finance, all from publicly available, volunteered, or just forgotten data. No hacking involved at all. That really is an aha moment about just how much is out there and connectable.
Yeah, this demo really highlights how fast OSINT can consolidate these scattered pieces into something coherent, something potentially threatening. If we look at the common exposure points again, social profiles account for maybe 70% of initial leads. Tools like OSINTogram for Instagram or Magrit for usernames help find accounts, but also scrape old posts, connections, even likes revealing interests. Forgotten accounts are huge. Tools like Epios or GoSearch help track down old emails linked to dormant forum profiles or dead websites. Public records, as we saw, are key. Tools like ClusMaps or Been Verified are designed to quickly aggregate property records, voter rolls, potential relatives exposing addresses, and news archives and images. Tools like PyMice for reverse searching faces or advanced Google searching, borking, find mentions, articles, and potentially geotagged photos.
You mentioned some specific tools there, like Magrit, PyMice. Can you give a bit more insight into maybe one or two others, like Maltego? That one sounds pretty advanced. What does it do?
Sure. So Maltego is really interesting because it's all about visualizing connections. You feed it a starting point, maybe an email address, a name, a company. Maltego then queries dozens of different public data sources, social networks, domain registries, breached data, business records, sometimes even dark web market listings if configured. But instead of just giving you a list, it draws a graph. It shows visually how entities are linked. So you might see an email address linked to a LinkedIn profile, which is linked to a company, which is linked to a physical address, which is linked to property records showing co-owners, all laid out as interconnected nodes. It lets an analyst instantly see complex relationships that would be incredibly hard to spot in raw text data. Other tools focus elsewhere. Shodan isn't about people. It scans the entire internet for connected devices, webcams, servers, industrial control systems, routers. It finds devices that are publicly accessible, often due to misconfiguration, which is a whole other angle of OSINT, focused on infrastructure. And something like the OSINT framework isn't a tool itself, but a massive online directory of tools, categorized by what they do, guiding practitioners to the right resource for their specific task. But the key takeaway always is that no single source usually gives you the whole picture. The real power, the real intelligence comes from the aggregation. It's the careful, systematic collection and, crucially, the connection of all those small, scattered fragments into a meaningful whole. That synthesis is where the insight or the threat emerges. So we've seen how this data is collected and connected, but this isn't just an abstract technical exercise, right? This aggregation of your public data. It's the raw material, it's the fuel for a whole range of pretty harmful activities. And this is where the shift happens, from data points on a screen to real human impact. The cost of this fragmented digital footprint becomes starkly, sometimes frighteningly clear. Let's start with social engineering. Now, this isn't hacking in the sense of breaking code. It's a cyber attack that plays on human psychology. It's about manipulating people, tricking them into revealing sensitive info, or taking actions that lead to data loss, financial loss, you name it.
And that publicly available data we've been talking about, that's the prime ammunition here, isn't it? Because it provides the context, the personalization that makes these scams just so believable, so effective.
Exactly. Take spear phishing. This isn't your generic, your account is locked, email sent to millions. No, spear phishing is highly targeted, highly personalized. Attackers use details scraped from your LinkedIn, your company website, maybe public record your job title, names of colleagues, recent projects you worked on, maybe an event you attended. They use this to impersonate someone you trust, maybe your boss, a vendor, even a colleague. Then they craft this incredibly convincing email that seems totally legitimate because it uses real details from your life. That perceived legitimacy just lowers your defenses, makes you much more likely to click that malicious link, open that infected attachment, or wire that money. The familiarity built from your own public data is the weapon.
And then there's credential stuffing. It feels maybe like a different threat, but it's directly linked to all this scattered data too.
Absolutely linked. Credential stuffing happens when hackers get their hands on huge lists of usernames and passwords leaked from past data breaches. Billions of them are out there. Now, because so many people, unfortunately, reuse the same password across different websites, attackers use automated bots to try these leaked email password combinations on hundreds, thousands of other sites, banking sites, email providers, shopping sites. That password from an old forum you barely remember, bought cheaply on the dark web. If you reused it for your bank login, that's how they get in. It's a numbers game for them, exploiting that common poor security practice. So the core message here, the really critical thing to understand, is that the biggest threat often isn't just that your data exists publicly. It's how it can be weaponized through aggregation and correlation. The attacker's ability to build that convincing, personalized story, a story that rings true because it's woven from the actual threads of your life, is directly tied to how much public data they can gather and connect about you. The more dots available, the sharper the spear they can craft.
And this weaponization can lead to some really devastating and deeply personal attacks, like doxing. Doxing, just to be clear, is when someone maliciously collects and then publishes your private information online, home address, phone number, family details, usually with the intent to harass you, blackmail you, maybe even put you in physical danger. The OSINT techniques we just walked through, those are the fundamental methods used for doxing. It's becoming more common, too. Reports suggest doxing incidents increased by about 20% in 2025, likely because this data is becoming easier to aggregate.
And related to that, identity theft. Those breached credentials, combined with other publicly available details like your birth date or address, maybe from voter rolls or property records, give criminals the pieces they need to impersonate you, open fraudulent accounts, or take over your existing ones. The more complete the data set they have on you, the easier it is for them to convincingly pretend to be you. But this brings up a really important point, kind of the dual-use dilemma of OSINT. While doxing is clearly malicious, the exact same OSINT tools and techniques can be, and often are, used for tremendous good. We see incredible examples all the time. OSINT has been used to unmask large-scale phishing operations, saving potentially thousands of victims. It's helped expose hidden assets or sensitive property purchases linked to sanctioned individuals or nations. Investigative journalists use it to uncover corruption. Humanitarian groups use it to find missing persons or track human trafficking networks. Law enforcement uses it to solve crimes, even trace stolen cryptocurrency. So it highlights this critical ethical tightrope. The same methods can be used for harmful doxing or for beneficial de-anonymization in the public interest. The intent, the context, and the ethical framework guiding the use are absolutely crucial.
Right. And beyond these direct attacks, there's also a more subtle, maybe long-term cost. It's about reputational risk. And this idea of your online self being fragmented and potentially misinterpreted.
Yeah, that's a really significant point. Because your digital footprint is so scattered across different platforms and contexts, individual pieces can easily be taken out of context. A joke made on one platform might look terrible when presented elsewhere without that context. A strongly worded opinion from years ago might be used to paint a completely inaccurate picture of who you are today. This fragmentation makes you vulnerable to misinterpretation, intentional or not.
And that ties into this concept of the unforgiving archive. The idea that pretty much everything you do online leaves some kind of trace, even if you delete it. The data might stay on servers, someone might have screenshotted it, or it gets captured by archives like the Wayback Machine, which has been snapshotting the public web for decades. This digital permanence means an opinion you held 10 years ago, maybe something you said as a teenager, can be dug up, stripped of context, and used against you today. It doesn't matter how much you've changed, that digital ghost can be resurrected. It's kind of terrifying, the idea that your past self is perpetually on trial.
And this poses very real risks. Risks to your professional credibility, your job prospects, your social relationships. Your online reputation, built from these persistent fragments, has become incredibly important, arguably more so than your offline one in some contexts. Old opinions, past mistakes, youthful indiscretions that can live forever online, easily found and potentially weaponized, impacting your future in ways you might never anticipate. The digital world rarely forgets, and it rarely forgives context.
So that feeling of control we talked about earlier, the comfort we get from managing our privacy settings, it really starts to feel like an illusion when you consider the technical reality of how data persists, how it's archived, how it's aggregated. You might feel in charge, but the underlying systems, the permanence of the data, often ensure that control is limited, maybe even illusory. Your shadow profile keeps growing, whether you like it or not.
Okay, so we've seen the scale of the data, the methods used to connect it, and the potential human cost. How does the law actually grapple with all this?
Well, in the U.S., the legal landscape for data privacy isn't a neat, tidy picture. It's often described as a complex patchwork. It's a mix of federal laws, state laws, and industry regulations, which is quite different from the EU's approach with the GDPR, which is much more comprehensive and unified. Yeah, that's true. Here in the States, our federal laws tend to be pretty specific to certain sectors. You've got IPA for healthcare data, GLBA covering financial services, COPA for protecting kids under 13 online. But they're narrow. There isn't one big federal law that gives broad privacy rights to all adults across all types of data.
But we have seen significant movement at the state level. California's CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act, was a landmark, and other states are following suit. These laws typically give consumers more control, the right to know what data companies have on you, the right to ask for it to be deleted, and importantly, the right to opt out of having your data sold. However, and this is a really crucial loophole in the context of our discussion laws, like the CCPA often explicitly exempt publicly available information. And they usually define that as information lawfully made available from federal, state, or local government records. So what does that mean? It means data brokers and OSINT practitioners have a clear legal basis, even under stricter state laws, to collect and use things like your home address from property records, your voter registration details, your professional license information, because that data originates from a publicly available government source. It's a carve-out.
Wow, so that's a pretty significant gap. It basically means our laws haven't really caught up with how easily this public data can be aggregated and used in ways people wouldn't expect. It allows data brokers to operate legally, collecting stuff many of us feel is private just because its source was a public record somewhere. It feels like a technicality that undermines the spirit of privacy.
Which leads directly to the ethical dimension. Just because collecting and using this public data is legal, does that automatically make it ethical? This is a central tension, especially in the OSINT community and for data brokers. For certain uses, investigative journalism, exposing corruption, law enforcement solving a crime, national security analysis, you can make a strong argument for the public interest. The OSINT serves a greater good, potentially. But does that same justification apply when a corporation uses OSINT to build detailed marketing profiles? Or when an individual uses it out of sheer curiosity or worse, to harass someone. The context, the purpose behind the data collection becomes critically important from an ethical standpoint. It's not a one-size-fits-all justification.
And there's that power imbalance too, right? Big companies and governments have these sophisticated automated tools scraping and analyzing data constantly. Most individuals, we have no idea it's even happening. We don't get a chance to see the profiles built about us, correct errors, or object to how our data is being interpreted or used. It feels very one-sided.
It is. And this really forces us to rethink what consent means online. The idea that just because information is publicly accessible somewhere, that implies consent for any kind of use. That really oversimplifies things to the point of being meaningless. Did you consent when you registered to vote for that address to be bought by a data broker and sold to marketers? Did you consent when you posted on a public forum for that post to be scraped, analyzed, and added to an intelligence profile? Probably not. There's a critical difference between legal compliance operating within that public records exemption, for example, and genuine ethical responsibility, which involves considering the context and the individual's reasonable expectations of privacy. It's about contextual integrity.
Okay, so understanding this tangled web of legal loopholes and ethical gray areas, what can you, the listener, actually do? What are the practical steps to try and minimize your exposure in this environment? Well, the first, and maybe most important, is to audit your own digital footprint. Basically, do some OSINT on yourself. How? Start by searching your full name online, maybe add your city, try any old usernames you can remember, use different search engines, then definitely check your email addresses on Have I Been Pwned, see what breaches you're caught up in. That tells you where credentials might be exposed. You can also check the Wayback Machine for archives of old websites or profiles you might have had. And there are even services now that help you track down accounts linked to your email address, which can be great for finding those forgotten digital ghosts.
Yeah, being proactive is key. And some fundamental hygiene steps make a huge difference. First, lock down your social media. Really go through the settings. Make profiles genuinely private, not just friends only, if possible. Remove sensitive details like your exact date of birth, phone number, home address from the public parts of your profile. And critically, strip that metadata from photos before you upload them. Most phones let you disable geotagging for photos, or you can use online tools. Also, be mindful of your friend list who can see your stuff, because their connections or privacy settings might expose your information indirectly.
Next up, and this is basic but absolutely vital, manage your credentials carefully. Use a password manager, seriously. Let it generate unique, strong, complex passwords for every single website. No excuses for reusing passwords. And enable multi-factor authentication, MFA or 2FA, everywhere you possibly can, on your email, your bank, your social media, everywhere. That extra step, getting a code on your phone or using an authenticator app, makes it so much harder for someone to get into your account, even if they somehow get your password.
Then there's tackling the data brokers. You can take steps to reduce your data broker exposure. This involves actively finding these people search sites and submitting opt-out requests. It can be tedious, honestly. There are paid services like Incogni or Delete Me that automate this process, claiming to remove your data from dozens or hundreds of brokers. It's an ongoing battle, but reducing your presence there helps. Also, consider using a P.O. box or a mail forwarding service for non-essential things like magazine subscriptions or online orders, rather than giving out your home address repeatedly.
And finally, it really boils down to practicing mindful sharing. A simple habit. Wait until you're back from vacation before posting all those photos. Don't advertise an empty house. Look closely at photo backgrounds, blur out street signs, house numbers, license plates, anything identifiable. And just develop that habit. Before you hit post or submit, ask yourself, am I okay with this being public, searchable, potentially misinterpreted, maybe forever? That pause, that moment of reflection can be your best defense.
And just briefly, for professionals who use OSINT investigators, journalists, security researchers, there's a real need for a strong ethical framework. Key guidelines usually include ensuring legality, ethics, and accuracy, sticking to public sources, respecting privacy laws, verifying information rigorously, maintaining strict operational security, OP says, to protect themselves, having a clear purpose and proportionality, only collecting what's necessary for a legitimate goal, and respecting contextual integrity, understanding the original context of the data, and avoiding misinterpretation. It's about wielding these powerful techniques responsibly. ##Act6, Future Trends in Conclusion. So where's all this heading? The OSINT landscape, this invisible web, it's not standing still. It's evolving rapidly, mainly driven by technology. One huge trend is AI-powered correlation. Machine learning is getting incredibly good at finding subtle links between fragmented data points, building those detailed profiles much faster, and potentially predicting behavior with greater accuracy than humans ever could.
And it's not just digital data anymore, right? We're seeing satellite and drone OSINT becoming more accessible. Cheaper, high-resolution imagery adds this whole physical, spatial dimension. You could potentially correlate a social media post with satellite images to verify a location or track movements over time in ways that were science fiction just a short while ago.
Absolutely. And then there's the explosion of the Internet of Things, IoT footprints. All your smart home devices, wearables, connected cars, they're generating a constant stream of metadata, not just location, but daily routines, energy usage, maybe even voice commands. This creates an incredibly granular, intimate layer of data about your private life, much of which could potentially leak or be collected. We also have the rise of synthetic identities. While OSINT helps detect fakes, the same public data aggregation techniques can ironically be used to create incredibly believable fake personas for fraud or disinformation. It blurs the line between real and artificial online identities.
And AI itself brings new challenges, the whole AI and data privacy issue. Generative AI tools can be vulnerable to attacks like prompt injection to steal data, and poorly secured AI systems create new breach risks. Companies are grappling with how to train these powerful models without compromising user privacy. Things like data minimization and ensuring transparency become critical.
But looking further out, there are potential shifts towards more user control. Ideas around decentralization and tokenized consent are gaining traction. Imagine using blockchain-based systems for self-sovereign identity, where you hold your own digital credentials and grant specific, temporary, maybe even revocable access to your data, instead of companies hoarding it. And we're seeing evolving legal frameworks. Regulators globally seem to be moving towards stricter enforcement and bigger fines, especially around sensitive data like location and health info. New rules about sharing data across borders also suggest more corporate accountability is coming. So, wrapping this all up, how do you live with this invisible web? The hard truth is your data is public in ways most of us don't fully realize. Trying to achieve complete anonymity online is probably a myth in today's world. But privacy isn't necessarily about vanishing. It's more about understanding the risks, strategically minimizing your exposure where you can, and consciously controlling the information that matters most to you.
Right. You probably can't erase yourself from every database or archive out there. It's just not feasible. But you can take meaningful, empowering steps. You can reduce the amount of new data leaking out about you right now. You can significantly harden your accounts against compromise. You can educate yourself about what's likely already out there. And you can cultivate that habit of mindful sharing, always asking that question, do I really want this out there permanently?
Exactly. So this deep dive, really, it's a call to action. It's about shifting from maybe feeling resigned or overwhelmed to making conscious, proactive efforts. The invisible web isn't going away. It's part of our digital reality now. But awareness, combined with proactive defense, is genuinely your best shield.
And that's all the time we have for this deep dive into the often unseen world of your public data footprint. We really hope you feel more informed, more aware of the landscape, and hopefully more empowered to navigate it safely.
So maybe leave you with this thought. In a world where basically every click, every post, every digital interaction adds another piece to this permanent, public, aggregated dossier about you, how do we strike that balance? How do we reconcile the clear benefits of being connected, of sharing information, with what feels like a fundamental human need, maybe even a right to some form of private life, especially when so much of that private life now has a public digital echo? What conscious choices will you make about your digital self now that you know more about the extent of the invisible web all around you?
Keep learning, keep questioning those defaults, and join us next time on The Deep Dive.